What's up, everybody? Drasco here from 10knorm.com, where my main focus and our main focus is how do we get coaches that are inconsistently hitting 10K per month income levels to overcome the emotional and the mindset pieces, the emotional and the mindset challenges that hold them back from normalizing that level of income, then focus on the marketing tactics to actually stabilize them. So each and every episode that I do dives into a topic surrounding the normalizing or the stabilizing aspects of that. And each and every episode comes with additional notes, resources, bonuses, and also the actual notes I use to record these, all of which you can download at 10knorm.com. Okay, so go there right now, get not just the resources for this episode, but for all the other previous ones. And for today, what it is that we're going to look at is 3 uncommon reasons why your marketing isn't working, but it is working for other coaches, right? How is it that the same thing, right, the same strategy, the same tactic works for one person but doesn't work for the other? And this is universal and beyond marketing, which is much like many of the things that I explore on this topic and on this channel. But what it really comes down to, and so my background is from the fitness and nutrition space. I owned a brick and mortar weight loss center for 10 years before moving into this direction. So we see the same thing in dieting. Every diet works, but not for every individual, right? Keto works, but not for everybody. Keto works for one person, not for this person. Same with paleo, same with low carb, same with high carb, high fat, low fat, same with the soup diet, same with the Twinkie diet, which is a thing, and you can Google that. So everything works, but nothing works for any one individual thing. Why is that? It's the same thing for marketing, right? Doing a podcast works for everybody, but not for any individual. Posting on Instagram works for everybody, but not for any particular individual. Why is that the case? Okay. There's various different ways to look at this, and I'm going to go into 3 of them that are uncommon. So this isn't a typical post of like, hey, 3 mistakes you might be making in your marketing and what to do to fix them. And, the mistakes are like, oh, you don't have a call to action. That is in the tactical aspects of this whole puzzle. And while those things certainly are relevant, they are the quote unquote easy thing. So what I'm more interested in exploring and what the 10K Norm program is ultimately all about is in what ways do we get in our own way to make the tactics work? And what we're really going to explore today is how do we get the tactics, or rather, how do we choose the tactics that align with who we are so that they have the best possible chance of actually working for us, i.e. how do you authentically market is really at the core of today's episode. All right. So if you are watching this on YouTube or any of the other video platforms, you'll see that I'm going through certain notes. Again, if you want access to notes and the additional resources, go to 10knorm.com to download those. And the 3 things that we're going to go through today are going to start with, are you focusing on more or are you focusing on closer? And this idea was originally brought to me by Nick Peterson, who is a very brilliant business and marketing guy. So highly recommend you check him out on any social media for not just deeper dive into the specific point I'm going to talk about today, but just in general points related to business and not following the gurus and things like that. Highly recommend check him out. Go to bumpersbook.com as well, I believe is his book. So anyway, check that out. Now, on to more versus closer from my vantage point as it relates to normalizing and stabilizing 10K months for coaches. So more things, doing more, having more, focusing on more doesn't mean you get closer to what you want. Okay? And a way to visually see this is if I wanted to go from where I live, so Toronto to Florida, Okay. I could drive straight down the East Coast. Doing that means I have moved closer, or as I'm driving in that direction, that means moving closer to the destination of where I want to go, which is Florida. I could also make my way to Florida by driving all the way across Canada to BC, and then all the way down, driving through the US, down to whatever, LA, and driving back across east to Florida. I have traveled more, I've covered more distance, but none of that distance actually got me closer to my destination. In fact, it got me further away from my destination. Okay, now, when it comes to driving, that is an obvious example. Like, why in the world would you drive that way unless you wanted to do some sort of scenic route or whatever? Okay, but think about that in terms of how most of us as coaches are told to market, are told to go out into the marketplace, are told to even do business. It's more leads, more clients, more prospects, more content, more posting, okay, more showing up and how you show up. Does that actually get you closer to what it is that you want? This has been an extremely useful frame for me to look at what it is I do, and I'm going to go into kind of why I'm doing this particular channel, this particular podcast in this way, when I actually resisted doing podcasts for a long time because I don't really listen to them in the way that they're normally done. So like, yeah, it's not for me. But in the end, doing this process actually gets me closer to what I want, and I will define that. So what I ask for you as the coach who's trying to normalize and stabilize 10K months, are you focused on doing things you feel like you should be doing versus getting closer to where you want? So how do you know what's closer towards what I want? Where it's like, if I want more clients, okay, but does that actually mean I have to get more new clients? Can that mean having my current clients upsell to higher level packages for continuation programs? So I'm not focusing on new people, I'm focusing on current people. Going back to people I've spoken to before and just checking in and seeing how they're doing, if they need any other support. It could be running a webinar or a free training or a paid training to the people that are already in your world. So oftentimes we'll focus on like more of what's out there instead of looking at how do I serve the people that are right in front of me? How do I have the conversation that is right in front of me? How do I, if I coach an executive or an owner of a business, can I see what it is that they need organizationally and pitch them that? That gets me an extra 10K contract right there, right? So I'm not saying any of those are necessarily what things you have to do, but what I am saying is we're so focused on the form the marketing takes that we ignore how it is that it got there. And what is it actually used for, right? So when I used to run ads for other coaches, so oftentimes the kind of, not conflict, but there'd be resistance and friction between us because I was like, okay, well, we can run ads, but just note that ads simply multiply, turn up the volume, and make bigger what is already there. They're not a magic solution to getting you more leads. Like if what's currently there is broken or it has a lot of leaks, you're just going to get a lot more leaks when you run ads to it and you're going to pay for it. So that is an example of no, but I just need more to fill those gaps. Well, no, you fill a leaking bucket not by putting more water in it, you patch the leaks out first, right? Again, another Nick Peterson thing. So I just want to make sure I'm giving credit where credit is due. But that is a big reason why most of us as coaches just follow these narratives of I just need more, because the person selling you the more like that's what they do. They sell you more leads. So of course you need more leads, right? Same thing. You go to a barber, you ask them, do you need a haircut? They're always going to say yes. Like, why would a barber be like, no, you actually don't need a haircut? It's not going to happen, right? So when we look at this in a more concrete example, because I don't want to just kind of spew out examples because I don't know where you are. So it doesn't make sense for me to talk about and assume things. Like, I prefer to speak to the individual and then we can work through what the issue is. But if I look at what I'm doing with 10K Norm and everything that I want to start and everything I want to share with the world, closer for 10K Norm, and the reason why I decided to go and do this like podcast or content and put it out into the world, as I said before, like, I resisted it because I do consume a lot of like YouTube content. Like, I like video and all of that. I don't necessarily like podcasts. Auditory isn't the best way that I tend to learn and consume information. So like, even like Joe Rogan that I listen to a lot, I just listen by watching the video. I don't listen on the audio only version. Okay. But I understand a lot of people do, and that's cool. So closer for me then wasn't, I want to start a podcast so that, everybody else starting a podcast seems to be the cool thing to do. It was, I wanted to make a resource that was worth paying for, but available for free. And I wanted to make it into an asset that, if my assumptions are correct, would grow into something bigger than what I could do if I did it any different way. Plus, and we'll talk about this in the next point, it works with my disposition. Okay, so let me break that down and I'll get into it in deeper as we go into number 2. So I do very well with like teaching. Even in the studio, it was not a problem for me to be in front of a group and to teach and to break down topics into usable forms. I did it in many different aspects in the brick and mortar weight loss studio that I owned. I didn't like and don't listen to most like interview style podcasts, because I usually just find that they're like cool stories, but I don't really find them useful, and I prefer useful things. That's just how my brain focuses. Like, I like to learn concepts, I like to break them down, and I like to see how they would be applied. So starting this for me was, okay, when people like listen to me, when we have deep conversations, when we dive into topics, people generally then are like, yeah, this is cool. I want more of this. Let's work together. Let's do whatever. And I realized by following the more, right, I should post more. I should do it in this way. It should look this way. It should follow these guidelines. Like, Instagram should be short form. This should be long form, whatever. Like, I realized that that's not actually getting me closer to what I want. What I want is to build a resource of 100 episodes that really allows somebody who even doesn't work with me to get a lot of value out of it. And by value, as I define as a resource, is like they would keep coming back to listen to what I have to say. Plus, they would download the things that I offered, they would work through them, and they would actually see a result. That to me is what a resource is. So I wanted to build an asset of 100 episodes that's going to get me to be better at these particular skill sets. And then I wanted to do that by testing it in reality. So like, I believe this is going to work. I think I have a lot of stuff to offer. I think I have a narrative that isn't really repeated quite a bit in the marketplace. And I believe this needs to exist. So I'm going to test those beliefs, test those assumptions in reality by putting this out there in the best way that I see fit as of this moment. And then I'm going to let reality give me the feedback on whether that's true. But where I have to show up is in the execution of that. And putting these episodes out there in this way is what gets me closer to that. So notice that none of my reasons have really anything to do with marketing per se. The marketing is built into it, and there were very, conscious decisions on setting up 10knorm.com, and that's where you download the resources, and it's in every episode, and it's on as many platforms, and like the distribution element of it is there. But this works for my version of Closer, right? It's a commitment. It gets me out there to do the thing that is to do. I get to build a skill around it. I get to refine my own ideas by having to explain them out to people. I get to see how they react to it. And I get to build an asset, for better or for worse, that reality will gauge whether or not I'm correct. That, pumps me up. That is more important to me than what would be considered more. How many views does it get? Are people asking me for sponsorships? Can I do plugs? Who's the biggest guest on my podcast? Who else is featuring or talk? I don't care about any of those things, because this project isn't about that. This project is, if by the time I finish 100 episodes and 1,000 people listen to it, have at least half of them taken the action that I'm proposing because they found it valuable. That is a much better metric to me than the traditional more view of, hey, is this actually something that is worth pursuing? Because most of us, whatever level that we're at, whether we're looking to normalize and stabilize 10K months or beyond, we'll look at what is the narrative around what I should be focusing on, and then I try to do that thing. Okay, that is driving from Toronto to Florida by going to LA first and then driving across. It's covering more distance without actually getting close to what I want. So yes, there's an element here of I did a lot of thinking to see what is it that I actually want. And then when I know what I want, then I can, work backwards to define this is the path that's going to close the gap. But without even realizing that as a frame, you're just going to get and spin your wheels. It's I'm posting every single day on Instagram. Why is that not working? It might not be moving you closer to what you want. Once you know that, then it makes sense to even focus on the tactics, right? Realistically, there's many different ways that I could create a resource. This is just the way I ended up choosing it because it aligns with a lot of other things, right? But I could have done different avenues to do this, right? I could have been a guest on everybody's podcast and just use the time that I would spend recording this, pitching myself hey, I can go and I can provide valuable content on this, not just my story, right? So there's many different paths. This is the one I chose. Gets me closer. It's not just more. All right. So moving on to number 2 out of the 3 uncommon reasons why marketing works for one coach, but not for another, is disposition. And I've already kind of alluded to all of this, but I'm just going to repeat it here. Basically, you can look at disposition as all of the shoulds you're choosing over things you actually enjoy, things you're naturally good at, things you do even for free or for less money, right? Or the things that actually improve you. So basically, letting the shoulds, letting the narratives, letting the cumulative marketing, coaching, zeitgeist, letting that define what it is that you should be doing without ever asking yourself, is it part of my disposition? So how this can play up, it's I don't mind sitting, teaching, or whatever, being in front of people and just teaching, because I've done it for over 10 years in, group settings with, first with martial arts and then with my studio. I like doing it. I did videos even for my internal clients. So this isn't an issue for me. I actually like doing it. It as all of the other things before, it helps me break down the ideas, etc. For somebody else, they might actually just enjoy writing. If I'm somebody I hate getting on video, I have trouble verbalizing my thoughts, but when it comes to writing, I will make the best written material ever, and I could spend an hour doing a video and hardly get any usable material, or I could use that hour and write like 2 amazing articles that are gonna that are much more helpful, that become much more of a resource. If that is the case, then your disposition should dictate what it is you should do, not some other semblance of what it is that you should do. So when it comes to marketing, if you don't like managing a community, don't start a Facebook group. If you don't like the upkeep of a community again, right, or the upkeep of having to create a lot of content, don't do that, right? If you don't like the hours required or the depth required to work one-on-one with clients, don't do that. If you want to decrease the amount of times you show up because there's other things you want to work on, then focus on like memberships and subscriptions. If you do, then focus on this, right? Like your disposition needs to be a part of what you choose to put into the overall equation of what's going to get you to stabilize 10K months, because that's the only way it's ever going to be sustainable. It's the only way it's ever going to go forward. And ultimately, I know I talk about 10K months as a milestone, but really, if you're happy with 7K months and you can do what you want to do with those, great. Like, who am I to tell you how much money you need to make, right? The reason I chose 10K norm is because we use that 10K as this like common milestone. And I do believe that there is some validity to that of like, I have the traction to really do this, right? So disposition is, again, a big part of the reason why you might not have your marketing work. Because if you're just following what you should be doing, like I should be doing ads. No, I don't think you should be doing. Like if you're not at 10K months, I really don't think you should be doing ads. Don't go where your disposition isn't. Is really what it comes down to. All right. So focus on closer, not more, and balance that out with your disposition. So if you're doing the tactic and the strategy that is going against your natural disposition, you will lose. All right, and number 3, which is my favorite topic and what the 10K norm program is actually all about, is self-regulation. Okay, specifically thought hygiene and emotional management. These are 2 big components of the overall 10K norm program, where we spend 2 months normalizing, like, how do I self-regulate so that I don't get in my own way when it comes to stabilizing the 10K months with the marketing tactics. Being able to self-regulate yourself through the inevitable emotional and mindset issues that come up anytime you try to up level is more important than any marketing that you could possibly do. So if you think about it this way, if you knew nothing about marketing, but every single day you felt joyful, enthusiastic, confident to just get up and talk to whoever is willing to listen about how great your product is, do you think that is going to be more useful to you than if you knew everything about marketing but were reserved, doubtful, and apprehensive about telling anybody anything about your product? Okay? Which way do we more often tend to gravitate? And I've been guilty of this many, many more times than I care to admit. But the reality is, I was good at learning. I'm still good at learning. I'm still good at processing information. I'm still good at seeing the big picture. I'm still good at thinking. I use that as my crutch to never have to address all of the other emotional and thought issues that come up that are really in the way. I would have had a lot more comfortable ride building up my studio and a lot more comfortable exit had I known what I know now and ultimately what I teach in 10K norm. Being able to manage your emotion is number 1. So how do I deal with the discomfort that's going to come from hitting the resistance anytime we level up. And resistance is a term that I borrow from Stephen Pressfield, who talks about in his book, The War of Art, which is basically that predictable phenomenon on any single time we're doing something that is like our soul's calling. We are going to be hit with the resistance of kind of like that inertia of our lower selves just keeping us where we're at, because that's the safest path to stay where we're at. It's guaranteed to keep us safe, even though it's not the consequence that we want. Being able to navigate that, staying in that discomfort, being able to process and work through the feelings of that is way more important than any marketing tactic you might do, right? Because think about it, even if you knew what your closer was, you have a plan that you know is in line with your disposition, but you cannot navigate the emotional turbulence of executing that, it's still unhelpful. Like, it's still not going to get you actually closer to what it is that you want. So I'm going to go into a whole, like, I'm going to be spending a lot of episodes on all the aspects of how to do that. Like, whether it's, your resistance comes up as procrastination or perfectionism or imposter syndrome. Like, I'm going to be diving deep into all in each of those. But as a big picture, that is how you want to think about, hey, why is the marketing not working? Because you might actually have the right strategy. You might actually have the right chosen path and plan. But if you don't know how to self-regulate, it's not going to work. And in addition to the emotional aspects, it is the thought aspects. The story that I tell myself, while I don't necessarily believe in limiting beliefs as are normally being proposed, and I'll get into this in future videos, limiting beliefs certainly is one of them. How do you choose a better believable thought, right? Oftentimes the reason affirmations don't work, and I'm in this boat too, is like, if you're saying affirmations for the sake of saying them and you're not able to believe them to the point where you feel them, they're not going to work. And they just end up being statements that are actually doing more harm than good. So those aspects cumulatively are why you're not getting the results that somebody else is getting, even though you guys are doing the exact same thing. You've taken the same course, you've run the same ads, you put out the similar type of content, you put it out and execute the strategy that way. And again, I'm assuming you actually did it 100% because you can't really gauge a plan if the compliance isn't there. But that is the ultimate point, right? Is it even moving you closer? Are you just doing more? When you know what you want and you've defined a gap to get you there, is it aligned with your disposition? So is the actual moving the closer distance that you need to cover aligned with your disposition? If those things are in place and you're still lacking the objective evidence that you're executing that, then there's some drama aspect that is holding you back. That is the self-regulation piece. That is what you haven't normalized and built up the skill set yet, which is really then the main thing you have to focus on in order to actually win the game of getting closer. Okay? That is what this whole 10K norm bit is for me. It's like putting the human element back into marketing and business so we can be better individuals, self-regulate. Because entrepreneurship is one of these cool things that it'll throw everything. It's actually not entrepreneurship. Like, it'll force you as a mirror to face every aspect of yourself that hasn't been cleared up. That is the only way to move forward, because it'll always show you where we're getting in our own way, because every single growth aspect allows us to level up. And every single time you level up, you always hit resistance. When you hit resistance, that becomes the mirror, that becomes the gift of actually transcending that. And if you can't transcend it, finding the resources and working through, however it is you get to those resources, how to actually move through that. All right. That is that for today's episode. High level, I will be posting the notes for this on 10knorm.com. You can download all of those, and if something resonates, by having, they're all just Google Docs, you can literally take your own notes as I'm running through this because I'm following it on screen. So you can watch the screen bit on YouTube. You can download everything at 10knorm.com, not just for today's episode, but basically for any episode that has ever come out. You'll have access to all of those. There's bonus trainings on a bunch of them. So go over there and subscribe, all that other, good standard stuff. But 10knorm.com, that's the most important one. Peace out, everybody.